Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all attendees are in a listen-only mode. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Deb Rivera. Deb, you may begin.
Great, thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar event. We appreciate you joining us today for this webinar on diving into island areas cross-tabulations on data.census.gov. My name is Deb Rivera, and I am your host for today's event. Today, our presenter will give participants a walkthrough of the data.census.gov platform to locate the newly released 2020 Island Areas Cross-Tabulations data. I would like to first thank my Census Bureau colleagues for joining me today, helping to make this webinar possible and helping to support our speakers. So thank you all so much. I will be handing things off to our presenter in just a moment, but first I'll go over a few housekeeping items. So today we have a panel of experts available to answer your questions via the question and answer panel in WebEx. So we'd like to encourage participants to use the question and answer panel in WebEx to submit questions throughout the presentation. To do that, to submit your questions, just make sure that you use the All Panelists option from the drop-down menu so that all of our panelists can see your question. I will be using the chat panel to send helpful information, including instructions, site links or URLs, and contact information. So again, for questions, please use the question and answer panel. Make sure that you use the All Panelists option to submit your questions, and then use the chat panel to find links and other helpful information. At the end of the webinar, we will take your questions through the WebEx audio line. And for this portion, we will ask participants to raise the hand icon, again in WebEx, to indicate if they have a question. You will then be allowed to come off the mute and ask your question. Just remember, when we call your name, to just please unmute yourself. A quick note, the question and answer session at the end, we will focus on the platform, data.census.gov. We will not be able to go in depth to address questions on other 2020 census products, the data collection process, disclosure avoidance, or the methodology. And just one more thing, we are recording the webinar today, so all of the materials for this webinar event will be available through the Census Academy website, and we will be sending that out through the chat as well. So again, thank you for joining us, and now I would like to introduce our speaker, Tyson Weister. Thank you, Tyson.
Great, thanks, Deb. Thank you all so much for joining the webinar this afternoon on diving into island areas cross-tabulations on data.census.gov. My name is Tyson Weister, and I work on the communications team for the data.census.gov website. For today, before I dive into the live demonstration, I did want to give just a little bit of background information about the specific product that we're focusing on today. Again, it's called the Detailed Cross-Tabulations, and this comes from the 2020 Island Areas Censuses. It is the final product that has been released from the 2020 Island Area Censuses. We released this on February 15th, so last Thursday. It is available for each of the 4 island areas: American Samoa, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. It's also available this year for the county level equivalents. So it includes, for instance, district and island in American Samoa, municipality, whole island, and island. Those are the county equivalent geographies. If you'd like to learn more about all of the products that have been released for the 2020 Island Area Censuses, there is information on the link and QR code. But specifically for today, again, we're going to be focusing on the Detailed Cross-Tabulations product. This covers a wide variety of subjects. So it includes population subjects such as age, commuting, income, Hispanic origin, school enrollment, educational attainment. It also includes housing topics, for instance, gross rent, owner status, occupancy status, number of rooms and bedrooms, and much more. So if you visit the link shown on the slide or the QR code, it will give you the list of topics for your convenience. And just to put this into perspective, these topics include, again, the demographics as well as the characteristics of people in housing. So in the rest of the United States, the 50 states, District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico, similar information is collected annually through what's called the American Community Survey. In the island areas, these characteristics data continue to be collected through the decennial census and specifically the long form product. And one last helpful resource for you to learn more about the detailed cross tabulations data product, it's called the Table Finding Guide. And essentially there's 95 tables that were released for each of the island areas. They all begin with CT, and this file gives you a list. So what sets the detailed cross tabulations apart from other data that have been released for the island area censuses is the level of detail in terms of the topics being cross-tabulated, and you'll typically find 3 or more separate topics cross-tabulated within a single table. So having this table list helps you browse through the different table titles that are available. For instance, CT1 is sex, age, marital status, and children ever born by race. So it just gives you a sense as to what you can get through this product. With that background information in mind, I'd now like to focus the rest of the webinar showing you how to go about accessing the data, primarily through a live demonstration of the data.census.gov website, and then we'll share some resources and open up for your questions. For the live demonstration today, I'm going to show you how to get started very easily accessing these data and digging into the products. Then I'll show you more fine-tuned and precise ways you can go about searching. And at the end, we'll also show you how you can compare these data to the 2010 data. So for the first example, I want to show you how to use the single search functionality to pull up these tables, and we'll do educational attainment data in American Samoa. So on the live site, you'll want to go to data.census.gov and press enter. And you'll notice there's 2 ways to go about searching on the site, that single search bar right there in the middle of the page, as well as an advanced search or filters. We're going to use the single search to start us out, and I'm going to type in educational attainment, American Samoa, and then press enter. Do keep in mind that we're making our one best guess for what we think you mean when you type text in the single search bar. I always recommend in the upper left that you take a quick peek at how we interpreted. In here, you can see we found a matching topic for educational attainment and a matching geography filter for American Samoa. So it was interpreted as intended. There's a couple different ways you can search through the tables. There are 52 tables that match this particular set of search criteria. You can scroll through this page and view the different table titles. You can also click the tables tab at the top. So I find both of those ways pretty helpful, particularly with this data set where the table titles tend to be long. Do keep in mind here that if you put your cursor between the results panel that we see on the left and the table that we see on the right, you can drag and adjust the width of this particular results page. If you'd like more space on your screen to view the full table titles, we do make that option available to you. And as you browse through the list of tables, you can also put your cursor over a particular table and notice there's a pop-up. So here I have my cursor over the third table for CT53, and it says marital status, sex, and children ever born fertility by educational attainment. So once you get here, it's really just about clicking through, finding the table that you're looking for, and viewing the data. On this list of table results, you'll get the first 10 tables and then the option to page through the remaining 42 tables. You can also increase the number of tables shown by default. So I like to increase this to 50 if I'm trying to scan through a long list quickly and find data that I'm looking for. Again, click a table title in order to update The table data on the right-hand side of the screen will be drilling into that in just a moment. But I did want to point out one last note of awareness as far as how these tables are organized. In these 52 table results, you're going to get the most recent data on top. So 2020 data will be at the top of the list of results. The tables from the detailed cross-tabulation product, I mentioned they all begin with CT. And then within each of these list of 2020 data tables, they tend to be in alphabetical order. So you'll happen to see the CT tables first. Then you may see tables that begin with DP from an earlier release of demographic profile data for island areas. And then below that, you may see tables that begin with H for housing or P for population from a product called the Demographic and Housing Characteristics. So don't have to memorize all of that, but just pointing out that the CT tables and the 2020 will be towards the top of your list. I'm going to go ahead and take a quick look at this first table, educational attainment, vocational training, and sex by age. And these panels for your filters and your results are expandable and collapsible. You can click the chevrons to collapse them, as well as the buttons on the left, so you're able to access each of those panels as you want and need them. But particularly for these tables, they're rather large and you want to devote a lot of space on your screen to view the tables and pay very careful attention to the columns and rows. So this table is giving American Samoa in the first column. And then within that, there is a column for the total, and then a column for the different age groups. So educational attainments being broken out across these different ages, 25 to 44 years old, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, and the 65 years and over age group. Then on the left-hand side, you'll also want to pay attention to the rows as far as the different data that are available. So this table's giving educational attainment for the population 25 years and over who live in households. First, it's giving you that for the total population. Then as you scroll down, you'll see educational attainment data for the male population, educational attainment for the female population, and then there's also vocational training data as well. Again, your cursor can be placed in the column header between two columns in order to adjust the width. If you'd like to see the full labels across your screen, you can customize that. And I'll just take a quick look here at some of the vocational training data. These data are provided for the population 16 years and over who live in households. We can see that the total number of people 16 years and over who live in households is 32,000 approximately for American Samoa. And about 5,600 have completed the requirements for a vocational training program. As you scroll to the right, you would see these data across those different age categories. So notice how we're getting lots of detailed cross-tabulated information. We're seeing educational attainment, vocational training broken out by age and by male and female. So moving on, just to show you additional ways to go about searching. In the next example, I wanted to show you how to use the filters. So for this example, we're going to look at full part-time work status broken out across different occupation categories in Guam. So going back to the live site, we'll click the US Census logo in the upper left. That's always going to start us fresh from the landing page, clear everything out. And rather than use the single search bar, I want to show you the advanced search filters as well. So I like to start to see if I can find a quick answer to my question with a single search, but the advanced search filters are really handy because it allows me to precisely select search criteria. It allows me access to all available search options, and I don't have to come up with my own words or phrases to describe what I'm looking for. For these filters, you'll see a few primary categories to choose from: geography, topic, surveys, years, and codes. They'll be expanded by default, and we're going to choose the geography for Guam, as well as topic filters for occupation and full or part-time work status. To get started, I'll go ahead and choose Guam. It is a state equivalent geography, so when we click state on the left, we'll see checkboxes with different options, and we'll choose the checkbox for Guam. We're always looking for a checkbox as a final search selection. Any options we see with chevrons means when we click that word or phrase, we're going to get more detailed options to choose from. And when you do make that checkbox selection, you'll notice in the upper left, you'll see the corresponding filter has been successfully added. So we have Guam. Next, we wanted occupation and full or part-time work status. You'll notice those under the topics heading, a category called employment. From here, we see right away there's a checkbox for occupation. I'll go ahead and mark that checkbox. And then we wanted this cross-tabulated by full or part-time work status. So I don't see a checkbox here that covers that, but there is an additional category with the chevron called work experience. Once I click work experience, I'll see an option available to me that says part or full-time. Once you're happy with your selected filters, we have one geography and the two topics we want cross-tabulated. You can go ahead and click the search button in the lower right-hand side of your screen, and then choose tables at the top. So in this case, there happens to be just one table that matches this combination of search criteria. So data for Guam and a table that includes the topic occupation and the topic part or full-time work status. So it's found a specific table out of the 95 tables for the cross tabulations. It's CT76 that matches what we're interested in seeing. It is called Work Status in 2019 and Sex by Occupation. So looking at this across our full screen, we'll notice, like before, we see our geography, Guam, at the top. And I'm going to make a little bit of adjustment here. First, I'm going to look at the columns. So I'm getting data for the total in the first column. And this would be the total number of civilian employed people, 16 years and over. And then it's giving me in the remaining columns specific occupation categories. So just like before, you can drag these column headers to view, for instance, management, business, science, and art occupations, service occupations, sales and office occupations, natural resources, construction and maintenance occupations, production, transportation, and material moving occupations. So adjusting those columns or putting your cursor over will generate a pop-up option that gives you the full label. So across each of those occupation groups, we're seeing for the total number of workers, did they work full-time year-round, or did they work less than full-time year-round? So in other words, did they work part-time? That data are provided also specifically for male workers and for female workers, depending on what level of detail you're interested in. So in this case, we can see for Guam, there were approximately 16,000 part-time workers. And as you scroll across, you can see these data for the different occupations. And we can notice from this that there tend to be a high number of part-time workers in sales and office occupations and in service occupations. All right, so I'm going to move on now to a third example using data.census.gov. In this example, I want to show you more advanced and precise filters that you can choose to select to narrow your results down. We're going to show you how to download and save the data once you've found the table you're looking for. And we're going to show you the lower level geography, the county equivalent. So for this specific example, we're going to look at housing characteristics cross-tabulated by household size for St. Croix Island, St. John Island, and St. Thomas Island. These are the county equivalents in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Here on the live site, we'll start fresh by clicking the Census Bureau logo. And just like before, I'll choose the advanced search link directly below the single search bar. So I In our last example, we selected topic and geography. You can also specify search criteria that will narrow your results down to specifically the detailed cross tabulations data product. So if you wanted to do that, on the left-hand side under the years heading, go ahead and click the box for 2020. We'll see the filter here at the top. And then once we scroll down under surveys, you'll see a few different options. One of them reads Decennial Census of Island Areas. So we'll go ahead and click that. One thing I want to point out here, there are 3 different products I mentioned earlier. The demographic profile, which was released in October of 2022. The demographic and housing characteristics product, which were released in July of 2023, and then the detailed cross tabulations product, which is what we're focusing on today, that was released last Thursday. Each island area has their own data set, so you do want to know upfront which island area you're interested in accessing the data for. In this example, I wanted the U.S. Virgin Island geographies, so I'll choose the U.S. Virgin Islands detailed cross tabulations product. Right, so we have those 2 filters, the 2020 U.S. Virgin Islands detailed cross tabulations product. Next, I'll go ahead and specify my geography, which was the county equivalent. So on the left-hand side, I'll choose county. Following the prompts, I'll choose United States Virgin Islands. And I could check those islands individually or simply mark the checkbox at the top to choose all counties within U.S. Virgin Islands in a single click. And then the last thing I'll do, at this point, I'd be getting all 95 tables for this particular geography set. I'll go ahead and choose the housing topic. So under topics, we see a category for housing, and then we see a checkbox for housing. So I'll leave my search as is, 2020 U.S. Virgin Islands detailed cross tabulation for the county equivalents in the U.S. Virgin Islands and housing. I'll click the search button in the lower right, then choose tables at the top. In this case, out of the 95 tables, 11 of them are related to housing. And I'll want to go through the different table titles in order to find the one that's relevant to household size. So looking at these titles here, I'll expand across my screen, start scrolling down, and we actually see here the 5th table in my result list, CT37, selected housing characteristics by household size. When we click the table, it loads on the right-hand side of the screen, and I will display that table across my full screen. I'll look at the columns and rows, just like we've been doing before. St. Croix Island is first. Then we get data for St. John Island. And then finally, we'll see St. Thomas Island. So within each of these geographies, I'm first getting data for the total. So this is total number of housing units. Then it's giving me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or a category for 7 or more person households. It also gives me at the end the corresponding population living in the occupied units. So for instance, this first row is telling me that there are 10,072 total owner-occupied housing units, with a total of 22,036 people living in them. And then on the left-hand side is where we see all the characteristics detail for the housing units. So how many rooms are in the home, information about plumbing facilities, units and structure, value of the home. And then this is what I'm interested in focusing on, is the selected monthly owner costs as a percentage of household income. So how much household income are people spending towards their housing costs? Less than 20%, 20 to 24.9%, etc. I'm going to look at the median income that people are spending in owner-occupied housing units towards their housing costs. We can see for total housing units that are owner occupied, that median number is 12.8% in St. Croix Island. But then when we look at this across household size, we can see that smaller household sizes in this island, people tend to spend a higher percent of their household income towards those housing costs rather than larger sized households. So for one person households, the median number is 17.3% of their income going towards monthly housing expenses. Two-person household is 11.9%, three-person household 10.7, 10.3, and then we see numbers that are below 10% when we get into 5, 6, and 7 or more person households. Oh, and then we wanted to show again, of course, once you go through these steps, some information that's going to be helpful for you to learn more, as well as how to save the data. At the top hand ribbon, you'll notice a variety of table controls. One is the Notes button. This is very helpful. It gives you source information, links to technical documentation to learn more about this particular product, some generic information at the top relevant to the data set, and then some specific symbols included below if you see any special characters related, special characters that you could see appear in your data table. This will detail what those special characters mean. A couple other options I wanted to point out here. One is how to save the results. There's two primary ways to go about saving the data. There's the Excel button and the zip button. So the Excel is going to give you output that looks very, very similar to what we're seeing on screen. I'll go ahead and click Excel. Depending on what browser you are using, you'll see the download has occurred, and you'll go ahead and click that Excel file in order to open it up. Just like all of our other tables on the site, this will have two tabs. One is information with all the source details, links, notes, and then the second tab, which is called data, is probably what you're most interested in seeing. And again, this looks very similar to what we saw on screen. Notice it's very readable. It's in the same layout. Labels are indented as appropriate, and then you get your numeric values. And by the way, this option is optimized for printing. So that means if you print from Excel, you will get those data and labels repeated across pages. So you'll be able to see the complete table in your printout and make sense of what you're looking at. The other primary way to go about downloading the data is through the zip file format. This is going to give us machine readable output. So once we click zip, we'll get a pop-up window. We'll choose download.csv just to confirm that we are downloading the 2020 vintage. In the lower right-hand side, a progress bar for the download will load up to 100%, and then we'll open up that zip file. For each table that we downloaded, in this case it was just one, you'll see 3 sets of files. In this case, I'll choose the one that ends in CT37-data. That means it's going to have the data and the labels all in one file. And this is very different from what we saw in the Excel output. So each geography has its own row. As we follow the row across, we see all of the data that was previously on the nice table display on data.census.gov without any special formatting or indentation. And as you're scrolling through here, if for reference you want to make out for what we're looking at here, we were looking at median as one example and selected monthly owner costs. So just for your reference, the way that you would read the data here is column AH is from table CT37. It was column 1 of the table if you were looking at data for the total. If you were going to, for instance, the 2 or 3 person household, you would look at columns 2 or 3. And then R32 means it's the 32nd row of data in the table. The label is total owner occupied housing units, selected monthly owner costs as a percentage of household income in 2019, and then the median value. And remember, for the first geography we were looking at, it was 12.8. So this is a really good file format, again, if you wanted to work with this data in your machine, but if you want the readable output, do use the Excel. A couple other features here. One is you may need to click more tools, by the way, in order to see all available controls. There is a recently added cite button that gives you citation formats in popular reference options for you like MLA, APA, Chicago, etc., available for you to copy. Another helpful option is share. This, once you click the share button, will give a pop-up window allowing you one-click convenience to share the table results on social media as well as your email. It also provides a link for you to copy the link to the table, and when you access this later or share it with a colleague, it is going to load your set of filter selections. It's going to include all of your geography, so each of the 3 islands, and it's going to be clicked into the table that you were clicked into. So out of the list of table results, it remembers that you clicked into CT37. And that's going to be the primary functionality that we wanted to highlight for you on accessing the 2020 census data. But I did want to mention here about comparing back to 2010. So in this example, I pulled up the 2020 island area censuses detailed cross-tabulations table for the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, CT37. And in this case, I looked at rent as a percentage of median household income rather than owner costs for people that own their homes. And we can see that the value for this median in 2020 was 20.9%. So the median value, 20.9% that people are spending as a percentage of their income on rent. But what if we wanted to compare this back to 2010? We did not have the data for 2010 on data.census.gov. It was released through the File Transfer Protocol or FTP site. And also keep in mind that the 2010 data were only released for the island areas. It did not have any of the county equivalent geographies. But if we do want to compare this to 2010, I wanted to show you how to do that, as there are very helpful links in a press kit that was provided. So what you'll want to do is go to the press kit. This link will be included in the files for the webinar and can be shared via the chat as well. Once you get to the press kit, just wanted to show you how to go about searching for the data. You'll notice there's a heading for each of the 4 island areas. So we would go to Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And really all you need to do is focus on this first bullet point, 2010 census detailed cross-tabulations. The data were released in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. So you'll see about half of the tables in part 1 and the remaining half for the island area in part 2. And the technical documentation is what you'll want to click on first. So the data that I'm looking for, again, gross rent as a percentage of household income and broken out by household size, happens to be in part 1. But if you didn't find it in part 1, just check part 2. When you open the technical documentation for either part, you'll get a table of contents that will load. So you'll scroll down just a bit. And in both of those documents, the trick is to go straight to the table finding guide. Is my favorite way to look for these cross tabulations. Chapter 3, table finding guide. I'll go ahead and click. It will jump me to the table finding guide and I'll scroll through. The first page of table is for population subjects. So we see different categories in the columns and the rows, and then the corresponding reference number that we're looking for. But we wanted housing data. So we'll scroll through. The second table are housing subjects. So in the third column, we see household size is one subject. And then in the rows on the left-hand side, by the way, these are alphabetically ordered, we see gross rent as a percentage of household income in 2009. And the value that we're seeing is 3-3. So what this means is that the data we're looking for is going to be in the file for part 1, and it's going to be in the worksheet that's labeled 3-3. So in order to access that data, very easy to do, just back on the press kit link, you'll click the link that just says Part 1, the very first link. This will take you to the File Transfer Protocol, or FTP site. You'll then click the link that has Part 1 in the title. That is going to open up the file or download it, and you'll click to open. And by the way, the CNMI for Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. When you open up that file, you'll see here a list of tables and then the different sections in the worksheet below. So on the left-hand side, you can navigate so that you'll be able to click on section 3-3. Here we see 3.3. I'll go ahead and click in order to get to that data, and then we'll read the information. So the table 3-3 selected housing characteristics by household size, 2010. We get data in the columns. This looks very similar to what we were seeing on data.census.gov for 2020. Total column 1, 2, 3, 4 person households. In 2010, it provided data for 8 or more households as a category. And then on the left-hand side, we see similar characteristics that we saw before. So if we wanted to look at the 2010 gross rent for Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands as a percentage of household income, we see that section of the tables included here towards the bottom. There's a row that says median, and we can see that median gross rent value in 2010 also happened to be 20.9%, and we can view the data across the different household size as well. So pretty straightforward. If you do want to do that comparison, just remember that we need to be doing it from the 2010 Press Kit webpage or links to the FTP site. Wanted to share a few resources for learning more before we take your questions that you have today. First question and resource: where can I learn more about 2020 Island Areas Census's data? Two of the most important resources for you are included on this slide. One is the link to the technical documentation on the left. This includes documentation for all 3 of those products that have been released on data.census.gov. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll also see just information about the products themselves and when they were released on a high level. Another question: how can I learn more about accessing 2020 IAC detailed cross-tabulations data on data.census.gov? To supplement the information in this webinar, we also have put together 2 short videos, so about 10 minutes or less, where you can focus on accessing the data. The first one will show you how to access 2020 Island Area Census's cross-tabulation data generally, and showcases different features that you'll find useful on our site in accessing that data. On the right-hand side, there's a video specifically dedicated to showing you how to locate 2020 census data for the detailed cross-tabulations product and compare it back to the 2010. Also, just wanted to make sure you were aware we have resources for the other Island Area Census's products that were released over the past 2 years. There is a webinar for accessing the demographic and housing characteristics island area data, as well as the demographic profiles that you'll see on the left-hand side, those recorded webinars. We also have corresponding short video tutorials that you'll find throughout the video tutorial page for those products. And as we start taking your questions, I wanted to share one question that I had when I first started accessing these data. Why do I not see data for all of my geographies? And this boils down to remembering that each island area census has its own data product for the island areas. So what I'm showing in the screenshot is an example where I've searched for a particular table ID, CT29. I've selected each of the 4 island areas you can see in the upper left: American Samoa, Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, and US Virgin Islands. But then when I look at the table, I only see data for American Samoa. There's no additional columns for my remaining geographies. In order to see the data for those geographies, I need to be clicked into the product corresponding to each of those island areas separately. So there's 2 ways to click into the product. You can choose the drop-down menu at the top of your table. or you can click the View All 4 Products option on the left below the table and then choose the corresponding link. Two other resources that I wanted to share. One is data.census.gov email updates. When you visit the link, subscribe to data.census.gov updates and input your email address, this will include updates for things like our monthly newsletter that will alert you of the latest educational opportunities, system enhancements, and data releases to help you make the most of our site. What we focused on today was a specific island area product and showing you live demonstrations. If you'd like some hands-on practice, we have different workshops that are offered each month. So these are anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. You'll get time to view demonstrations, but also do your own exercises, come together as a group. There's 5 different topics: basic, advanced, and mapping on data.census.gov, one on using the microdata access tool to create custom tables, and another workshop on using the Census Application Programming Interface, or API. If you have feedback for us on how we can improve the site, we encourage you to click the feedback link, which will shoot us an email at census.data@census.gov. You can also send data questions that you have to us for assistance. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Deb as we start opening up for your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Tyson. So in just a few moments, we are going to open up the lines and see what questions you have for us. So today, we will be taking your questions over the WebEx audio. If you have a question related to today's content, we invite you to use the raise hand icon that is located next to your name or possibly at the bottom of the screen. Just remember when we call your name to please unmute yourself to ask your question. But before we move on to the Q&A portion, I would like to invite you all to give us your thoughts on today's webinar through a post-webinar survey form. And what that means is that the evaluation survey will appear in a browser automatically once you exit the webinar. So if you do have any notes for us to help improve on our webinars, or if you have any other ideas for topics that you would like us to cover in the future, please take a moment to fill out the survey once we wrap up the webinar today. Now, if you do have any questions remaining after the webinar concludes today, or if you would just prefer to email us your question, please feel free to reach out to any of the email inboxes listed here. If you are a member of the media, you may contact the Public Information Office at pio@census.gov for general data.census.gov questions from the public, or for training requests, please reach out to the Center for Enterprise Dissemination. And finally, for questions related to the 2020 Island Area Census's data products, you are welcome to reach out to Mr. Keith Woodling, who is one of our panelists here today. So with that, let's go ahead and see if anyone has questions for us at this time. Anyone in from our audience, if you do have a question, please use the raise hand icon to let us know that you do have a question. Okay, and we'll just give it a few minutes and see if anybody does have a question, but I can turn it over to Tyson, who has a few more slides to share.
Yeah, as we're waiting for your questions to come through, wanted to share some other resources for you. One is clicking the help button on the landing page of data.census.gov or visiting the link in the upper left will take you to a dedicated resources page to help you make the most of our website. This will include all of our short videos, recorded webinars, how-to materials with step-by-step PDFs and screenshots, as well as answers to your FAQs and information about upcoming data releases. And beyond that kind of one-stop shop for your data.census.gov training, we also wanted to make sure to give you the centralized training hub for the Census Bureau on census.gov/academy. This is put together by our data dissemination and training specialists. They cover training and resources not just on data.census.gov, but on all Census Bureau topics, tools, and data sets. They are also available for any local training requests that you may have. If you're a member of a local organization, for instance, there's a data dissemination specialist assigned to your state, and you can reach out for a free training request by contacting them at census.askdata@census.gov or by calling 1-844-ASK-DATA. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Deb to see what questions we all may have.
Thank you, Tyson. Just looking over, doesn't look like we have any questions today.
All right, well, if there are no questions, I will go ahead and put this on screen one last time. If something does come up and you want to email us in, we will be happy to engage with you. We appreciate you all joining the webinar this afternoon and look forward to seeing you again in the future.
This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.